If I told you that I purchased a new engine block, you might think that something catastrophic has happened to Wilson's engine. But maybe not. Stick around to hear what I did. Hey VW Bus fans, thanks for coming back to listen to Wilson the VW Bus podcast. I'm your host Joe, and I'm happy to let you know that Wilson and I are just fine. And no, I haven't blown up that 1915cc air-cooled VW engine yet. As a matter of fact, Wilson is running just fine, probably even better now that I'm driving him every day. The story about the engine block goes like this. When I was at the Dubs in the Shrubs event a few weeks ago, I ran into a vendor who looked very familiar to me. I couldn't figure out just where I knew this guy from, and then when he saw me, he was like, "Hey, I know you." It took a moment or two for the two of us to finally figure it out, but then I replied back to him, "Yeah, you're the guy I sold a few VW spare parts to on Facebook, right?" I had sold him some interior pieces and some spare parts that I no longer needed or had just upgraded on Wilson a few years back. Now, maybe it was about a year ago. It was a pretty cheap sale. I had honestly forgotten about the entire transaction. He had a few items for sale at the Dubs in the Shrubs, and one that caught my eye was this used spare VW long block. I asked him how much he wanted for that wonderful piece of lawn art, because it was just an empty long block with no heads or crank or pistons. It was not in great shape by any means. The only saving grace was that it was clean. I mean, there was no oil or grease or gunk on it. Just a big hunk of aluminum or maybe magnesium. I honestly don't know what these blocks are made of. They are very light because I picked it up with one hand and held it out to him for his review. He told me that he hadn't really sold much so far that day and that he'd be happy just to recoup the $25 that it cost him for the vendor space. I said with a surprise, "You only want $25 for this?" He said, "Sure." We shook hands, and I passed him the cash, and the deal was done. Now, I do not plan on using the block for another engine. I really doubt that this is in any condition to make it run again, but it would make an excellent piece of garage art or maybe a coffee table base or something like that. I know that I can find an upcycle project for this someday. So I threw it in the trunk of my wife's car, and then when I got home, I wanted to take a better look at my new acquisition. The engine is designed to be split in two halves, and with a little squirt of WD-40 on a few of the engine bolts and studs, I was able to just pull it apart with my bare hands. No tools necessary. Cool. Now I have two halves of a VW block in my garage. I'd eventually like to take a wire wheel and clean it up, but who knows, maybe I'll even polish it, if I can get it that shiny. Now, not long after I purchased my new block, I ran into Dave, Wilson's former owner, at the same show. We talked for a little while, and I even recorded the entire conversation for this podcast. So where is it, you ask? Of course, I accidentally deleted the file. I am terrible at this stuff. I'll get my stuff together soon, I promise. I just can't catch a break with this podcast stuff. Anyway, Dave came to the event in his grandmother's light blue Carmen Ghia, and what a cream puff this car is. She originally purchased the car brand new, and it has never left their family. He still has the original engine for it as well, although now he's running another engine. Someday I'm going to get Dave to re-record that interview so you can hear all about it and what he has done to it. And I'll make sure to post an Instagram pic of it for you guys. So Dave introduced me to a friend of his, a guy named Chris Wilson, who is ironically the engine builder who built the 1915cc engine that Wilson, the VW bus, is running now. Now, Wilson the bus is not named after Chris Wilson. Remember, the Wilson name is from the dealership in North Platte, Nebraska. It's just a coincidence. We talked for a while, and he wanted to know how Wilson was running, and he filled me in on a few of the details and parts that he uses when building his engines, like the valve lash specs and stuff like that. So he said that he was very proud of the work that he puts into his engines, and he gave me his number to call him if I ever had any questions or tuning issues. He said, anytime, just let him know. And I really appreciate that. Finally, now that I have my spare tire in Wilson, I thought it was only fitting to get a spare tire cover. So I reached out to my friends at no longer available VWparts.com for a new tire cover. No, I'm not sponsored by them, just in case you're wondering. They have a Westfalia half spare wheel tire cover in the nice Westfalia blue plaid that matches the rest of my interior in Wilson perfectly. It's product code C9254BL, just in case you want one too, and it only costs $60 US. I placed my order, and within about a week, it arrived from the UK, perfect shape. Pics are posted on the gram for those interested. Well, that is it for this episode of Wilson the VW Bus. I want to thank all of you for joining me, especially I'd like to thank my new listeners coming from Puerto Rico. That makes Wilson officially listened to in 11 countries around the world. I wonder how many more I can get. Next I need to work on getting Italy, then France, Portugal, Spain, Thailand, Denmark, Norway. Ooh, don't forget Ireland, Turks and Caicos.